Emilie Gardberg is the Wilson Center's Finland Scholar and is a former Chief Executive Director of the Turku Philharmonic Orchestra. She joins us to discuss a book she's writing about how music can change the world. Emilie, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Let me ask you about first your interest in music. I've had a chance to speak with you before we conduct this interview and know about your background. If you could share with our viewers your original interest in music and how that translated into an academic pursuit.
I have a extremely long background in music. My parents were both musicians, and so I had a formal training and I became a musician. But then very soon I found I longed more maybe for the administrative side of music, and I found myself working first as a festival director after my studies, and then now previously to coming here as an orchestra director. And especially I found a great connection with the audience work and making music meaningful to people, and making especially classical music, which is the field I work in, making that be significant in today's world.
Tell us about this program called Change that you did at the Philharmonic, and how that essentially created a template for the book idea.
Change started actually when the big refugee crisis was going on in Europe in 2014, and we had a huge influx of refugees, completely different to earlier times also in Finland, even though we're so high up north. And people felt really desperate, and it was a very cruel situation in a way that, you know, a lot of people wanted to close borders and were very afraid of the influx, and we, especially in my orchestra, I felt that the musicians, many of them also being international people themselves coming from outside of Finland, felt a really strong sympathy for all the people that were now in such dire straits. So then we started to think about what we could do maybe with music as a tool, because the orchestra was the thing we had, and we created a series with pieces which we found or thought or believed had somehow had an impact on society and somehow worked to change the world as we see it. So as in, for instance, bringing up discussion or having had a power that maybe has been even larger than the piece itself, having a power on society to change maybe views or something.
And the connection's not always direct. It's not somebody set out to write an anthem for a political movement. Sometimes it's meaning that's assigned afterwards by the listeners.
I think it's very often so. We have several pieces in the book. They are not. We don't do all the same that we did in the series. The concert series was a separate thing, but the idea is the same. So a lot of things actually were written for something completely different, or maybe they had a noble idea, but then what people have changed them into might be something completely different, or something maybe that can be monumental for a whole nation. For instance, one of the pieces we are looking at now is Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings, which here has become an anthem for big public sorrow, and that was kind of through Roosevelt's funeral, and then John F. Kennedy. Then it was used in September 11th when Princess Diana died, and so on. And we know that Barber didn't himself first at all like this way that the piece turned out, but the kind of the force of the people and the force of the common thing that it felt that it sort of evoke in people. That was the thing that then started to mean more than the actual original piece.
And how literally should we take this notion that societal change is possible through a piece of music?
I think we can take it very literally. I think music is something that evokes feelings very deeply, and or it can do it. Of course, not with everyone, but also it's a global language, and we don't need joined words. Many of the pieces we are using are not at all dependent on words or anything sang or anything verbal. It's more the feeling that you get and sort of the place that it puts you. And then when you put that in context with different issues such as immigration or independence or freedom of speech, then you can maybe start to talk to people in a different way than you would normally. You kind of get that common sense, or the common feeling for a thing, and then that opens up the minds and also makes the discussion flow more freely.
It reminds me of what discussions of storytelling. If you put forward a, say, political position or a position paper, you open yourself up to an argument. But when you tell a story, or in this case play a song, it's a very different reaction. The audience wants to sort of experience it and maybe even buy in.
Yeah, I think it's very much so. And if I may, I could maybe share a story about the piece Finlandia that was composed by Jean Sibelius, which is a famous Finnish composer, which we've used quite a lot over the years, not simply in this project, but also earlier. He wrote that in 1899, and that was written in a time when Finland belonged to Russia, and we were sort of waking up to how it would be to be independent and wanting very much to be independent. And he wrote it as a sort of a secret protest. It was part of a big play that they put up, a musical play, and it wasn't called Finlandia. It kind of was played in with many different names and was a secret piece. And even though being, of course, very public when it was played, and that piece has then, during Finland's history, it has transformed into this sort of anthem for the whole nation. And now we also think about the Winter War, which happened 50 years or 40 years after the piece was composed, but it still seems that Sibelius was sort of forecasting that in his piece. Then it's also become a religious hymn. I think it has 6 different hymns written to it. It's become a national anthem. It's become so many different things that also here I know they use it as a university anthem. Mm-hmm. So it's apparently a very piece that makes people very uplifted, and it's sort of like a global message. If you can put it into religion, into independence, into university like schooling, it means there's something very universal about the language in it, and that you don't really need to understand the original Sibelius purpose, which was non-verbal. It didn't have a word to it.
Right. I think of popular music examples. I think of something like maybe Neil Young's Ohio, which was tied to the Kent State Massacre. I think of maybe Melissa Etheridge had a song that became adopted as part of the climate change movement in Al Gore's movie. Why did you choose classical music versus other styles of music?
Well, that's probably a lot to do with my background, since my whole life has been very much sort of first learning to love classical music, which was sort of forced on me when I was a child, and then, sort of really growing into it, and now it's probably one of the biggest missions in my life is to promote classical music and to make people fall in love with the art form. Yeah,
you get to promote classical music while telling the story of how music changes things.
And what I notice when I tell the stories about the pieces is that people always say, "Oh, now I want to listen to the piece," and that's the most incredible thing, because then I get people to listen to Sibelius or Barber or Beethoven or whatever we're talking about, and we apply it to both modern classical music and to older ones. So it's sort of a very good way of tricking people, if I may, to also get interested, if they maybe first are interested in the topic, then secondly in the music.
Are there contemporary examples of newer pieces of music that are resonating in the same way?
Well, one piece that we're looking at, which I think is very interesting, is Sari Aho's. She's also a Finnish composer. We are using other than Finnish also, but she's one of the most prominent women composers in the world currently. And when her opera a year ago had its premiere at the Metropolitan Opera, it was the first time ever that a female conductor and a female composer met at the stage of the Metropolitan, which is very much overdue, and sort of we're looking at that from two sides, both from the message in the opera, which is a message of love, but then also as a message of kind of women in the arts and women taking their place in society. So this is a piece that we are using, which is very contemporary, and I think it's also but it's a lot of things to do with. It's not Sari Aho who put the emphasis on women in the piece. She wrote a piece about love, but then the audience has made it, and the reception, all the articles are about also the fact that women finally succeed. So that's kind of the thing with the book. It's not just what the music in itself could be, it's also what the audience then puts in it.
No. And will this be a multimedia experience? In other words, will you recommend people listen to the music, then read the chapter?
We will have some form of an app or something that you can connect with the book. Yeah. Then when it finally comes out, that you can sort of, when you're going through it, you will have easy access. And of course, we will try to find the best recordings available for that specific piece.
Sounds fantastic. What's the timeline? When will the book be finished? And you have 2 co-authors, correctly?
Yes, I have. Yeah, two co-authors in Finland. Both incredible, interesting women who come at this from different angles, and we write this together, all 3, which is an interesting project also to write together, and we hope to have it ready for publication in fall of 2018, so in just before Christmas, hopefully.
Well, look forward to it. And music lovers everywhere, and studies and political scientists. Emilie, thank you. Terrific project. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.